Good morning. We're glad to have you with us today. We'll start with our first positive affirmation. We lovingly and gratefully acknowledge the presence of the divine in our midst. And our purpose statement is there. Our purpose is to foster a new level of spiritual awareness through worship and fellowship, and to lift one another to a Christ-like maturity. We'll have a song now, One Power by Daniel Mann.
One power, invisible, and you see it everywhere and every day. One power, indescribable, and you speak of it with every word you say. Mysterious until you know the truth. As simple as the love inside of you. Call it God, call it Spirit, call it Jesus, call it Lord, call it Buddha, Baha'u'llah, angels' wings or heaven's door. But whatever name you give it, it's all one power, can't you see? It's the power of the love in you and me. One power, one power, one power, one power. We speak so many languages, different clothing, different colors, different names. The different is only dangerous when we forget that in the heart we're all the same. And we'll remember once we close our eyes to see that such distances were never meant to be. Call it God, call it Spirit, call it Jesus, call it Lord, call it Buddha, Baha'u'llah, Hashem or heaven's door. It's Muhammad, it's your mind, it's your soul, or it's your sign. It's the universe, it's music, Mother Earth or Father Time. But whatever name you give it, it's all one power, can't you see? Whatever name you give it, it's the very air we breathe. Oh, it's the power of the love in you and me. One power, oh, one power, one power is what we are. One power, one power. It's the freedom of forgiveness. It's the sweetness of release. It's the joy of inspiration. It's the sunshine on your face. It's the birthright of all nations. It's the boundlessness of space. It's the beauty of a baby, the serenity of sleep. It's the anger we abandon for its love that's most deep. It's one power. It's one power.
Each month, we celebrate one of our powers, and the power we celebrate in June is our imagination. This wonderful sky blue on the banner in front of the podium, our imagination. We're each part of the divine source of the energy that manifests as unity on the Eastern Shore here and now. And we celebrate the gift of life and our unity with all others, and affirm that we are one imaginative folk. This, the affirmations are next. Yes, together, there is only one and one power in my life and in the universe, God, the good omnipotent. Together, we know God blesses all special intentions present in our prayer box, and that God's perfect plan is in action. And together, we are alive, alert, awake, joyous, and enthusiastic about life. Yes. Our daily word today comes from John, Ray. John, it's your turn.
Good morning, and the reading is about appropriately Father's love. I give thanks for my father in all expressions of fatherly love. I treasure my childhood memories of feeling safe when my father or my father figure in my life was nearby. I remember my father's encouragement as I was learning to ride a bike, as we explored the wonders of nature together, as he taught me to use money wisely. Even when I made youthful mistakes, my father's sometimes stern but always wise judgment helped me find the way back to the right path. I give thanks for both the sacred human and the unfolding expression of God within my father and everyone who has blessed me with fatherly love. Today, I pray for my father and for all fathers, affirming for each of them growing wisdom, understanding, and willingness to nurture others with a father's encouraging love. John 15:9 says, "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love."
For the light and the shadow, for the triumphs and trials, for the moment and mystery, for the sorrow and the smile, for the peace and the conflict, for the silence and song, for the calm and confusion, for the winter and the warm. Oh, mother of my heart, thank you for the blessings of the the triumphs and trials, for the moment and mystery, for the sorrow and the smile, for the peace and the conflict, for the silence and song, for the calm and confusion, for the winter and the war, for the light and the shadow, for the triumphs and trials, for the moment and mystery, for the sorrow and the smile, for the peace and the conflict, for the silence and song, for the calm and confusion, for the winter and the war. Father of my soul, thank you for the blessings of the day. Father of my soul, thank you for the blessings of the day. Father of my soul, thank you for the blessings of the day. Father of my soul, thank you for the blessings of the day. Father of my soul, thank you for the blessings of the day. Father of my soul, thank you for the blessings of the day.
Good morning. Am I centered? I'll be very cognizant of my voice and not moving around too much this morning. Recently, I heard of a tradition in the Native American culture where you introduce yourself in relationship to your ancestors. And since it's Father's Day today, I'm going to introduce myself in that way. I had a great grandfather Mullen who owned a grocery store in Sligo, Ireland, and also owned a farm in County Mayo, Ireland. I had a great grandfather, Daniel MacDonald, who fought in the American Civil War. I had a great grandfather, Peter Doyle, who was an immigrant from Ireland. And I had a great grandfather, George Scott, who was an immigrant from Italy. And recently I also had my DNA done, and there is a possibility that I also have great grandfathers who were Caribbean African, who were possibly East Indian, Japanese, Scandinavian, German, along with the Italian, Irish, and Spanish. And my DNA absolutely and unequivocally showed that I am a child of God. And Jesus is my elder brother, and that we here on Zoom and collected in this room and everywhere in the world are part of one gigantic family. Now, Jesus, in his lifetime, did not write any books, but many books were written about him. And it is said that he spoke in the Aramaic language. And it was a special dialect of the Aramaic language called the Galilean Aramaic language. But his words were translated into Greek. And so many scholars believe that some of the deep metaphysical or spiritual meanings were lost in the translation. So there are several scholars who have done interpretations of his words with a focus on the Aramaic words. And one of them is Dr. Douglas Klotz, and he wrote a book called Prayers of the Cosmos, Meditations on the Aramaic Words of Jesus. So this morning for Father's Day, I'm going to read our traditional Lord's Prayer and do the Aramaic interpretation. And in the word that Jesus most likely used when he said our Father, he said, Avrum Shibash Mala, Avrum. And that's a combination of Abba an endearing term for father, and womb, which means womb. So he had a concept of a mother father God, a birthing from the womb of our source. And so this is how it goes. Our Father who art in heaven, O birther, Father, Mother of the cosmos, you create all that moves in light. Hallowed be thy name. Focus your light within us. Make it useful. As the rays of the beacon show the way, thy kingdom come. Unite our can to yours, so that we walk as kings and queens with every creature. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Create in me a divine cooperation. From many selves, one voice, one action. Give us this day our daily bread. Grant that we need each day in bread and insight. And forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Forgive our hidden past, our secret shames, as we consistently forgive what others hide. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Deceived neither by the outer nor the inner, free us to walk your path with joy. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. From you is born all ruling will, the power and the life to do, the song that beautifies all from age to age, it renews. Amen. And I just wanted to mention that yesterday was Juneteenth, and it's the first national holiday that's been proclaimed since the 1980s. And Unity has made a proclamation for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'd like to just read the very first paragraph of that from Unity Worldwide Ministries. An official statement from Worldwide Ministries. Unity Worldwide Ministries stands for anti-racism. We are opposed to racial hatred, racial violence, bias, systematic racism, and the oppression of people of color. We stand for diversity, equity, and inclusion for people who are marginalized because of color. We stand for diversity, equity, inclusion for those who are, I repeated that. No individual or group should be made to live in fear or excluded from society. Recent events in the United States and the world remind us that violence, repression, prejudice, injustices, and inequalities towards people of color are embedded in societies, from social structures to institutions to cultures. Unity chooses to be more aware and take positive action in dismantling systemic racism and the social structures that support injustice and prejudice. And we raise awareness throughout our membership, churches, and centers. Whereas Unity stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion for people of color, our second principle states, human beings have a spark of divinity within them, the Christ Spirit within. Their very essence is of God. Therefore, they are also inherently good. This principle applies to all people, regardless of color. It goes on, but I just wanted to give you the preamble, just that Unity, we're out there, we're aware of what's going on in the world, and we can make a difference. We stand for principles. I heard a little joke about a teacher was asking her students about Father's Day. What was Father's Day? And a little boy raises his hand. He says, well, Father's Day is a lot like Mother's Day, but he says, you don't have to spend as much money. So we don't really have the same amount of sentimentality about Father's Day. But it's interesting, I was looking at the history of Father's Day, and it goes back when I talked on Mother's Day, we talked about Mother's Day was really established through the efforts of a daughter. A daughter really felt, it was Anna Jarvis, and she was from Grafton, West Virginia. And she really felt the need to honor her mother and all mothers. And it was another daughter who was the daughter of a single dad, dad who was widowed when he was in his early 50s and was left with 6 children. And her name was Serona Smart Davis. And she was inspired by the Mother's Day celebration. And she thought there should be really a celebration to also honor fathers. And so she had the first celebration of Father's Day in her home state of Washington State, and that was in about 1910. And it sort of caught on traditionally, but it wasn't actually established as a holiday. I was surprised about this until 1972. So happy Father's Day. And in all of the centers that I've served, I always expanded Mother's Day to honor the women of God, because I think that we've all, as women, we've touched the lives of children. We've been teachers and nurses and friends and neighbors and aunties to children. And just as men have been, perhaps they're not a biological father, but they've touched the life of a child. Perhaps you've been an uncle or a big brother or a friend or a teacher or a coach, and you've made a difference. You've nurtured and supported a child. And we also honor all the single mothers who have had to be mother and father to their children. And we also honor the divine masculine, that Abba God that Jesus spoke about. The Abba, which was a term of endearment, a term of tender affection. And we, when we think of God and we use terms like mother, father, sometimes I know when I was a little girl, I thought of, God was up in the sky with the long white beard and was a man that was watching me all the time, sort of a punitive, watching for me to make a mistake. But of course, we know that God is pure spirit, and it perhaps has some characteristics of male and female, but is pure spirit. And within universal mind or spirit is the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And actually within the universe, there are male and female energies. We speak of the Mother Earth as female. We think of her as fertile, steadfast, and practical. And we think of the air as being more masculine, intellectual, remote, changeable, and active. We think of fire as being masculine because it has transformation and passion and inspiration. And we think of water as being more feminine, emotional, and nurturing. We think of the sunlight as masculine energy that's active and bright. And we think of the moonlight as being soft and gentle, feminine energy. And so within the universe and within God, although it appears that there are dualities, they're really polarities. Within the wholeness of God and the wholeness of us and the wholeness of the universe, there is polarities, but within the oneness. And we need all of those energies within ourselves and within the universe. We need the energies of the female, we need the energies of the male to come together in wholeness and for healing. I heard a story about a little girl, and she was working with her mom at home. She was about 4 years old, and her mom had her working with watercolor paints. And she had only the primary colors, and she somehow mixed the blue and the yellow, and she made this amazing discovery. She could create green. And so she went and showed her mom, and she said, look, I can create green. And she was making leaves, and she was making grasses and trees. And she says, I can't wait till Daddy comes home. I can show Daddy. And she's waiting there with all of her papers, and she has them in her hand. And Daddy comes in the door and, hi, honey. His phone rings, and he takes his phone, and he's walking upstairs, and he's talking on his phone. Little girl's pulling at his pants. Daddy, she's waving her green papers. Daddy. He's talking on the phone. He's going over to his computer. And he finally says to her, what's going on down there? And the little girl goes up to him and says, Daddy, this is where I live. Now, in our culture today, that's kind of the masculine energy, the prevalent masculine energy. They don't, that so much emphasis on success and busyness and competition that we don't have the time to get down to be with our children where they are, getting down where our children live. And I think several months ago, I talked about in Africa, when they greet each other, they have a saying, and they say, it comes out of the Natal area in South Africa, that when they see each other, they say, I see you. And the response is, I am here. I see you. I am here. It's sort of an acknowledgement that I see you in your essence. I see your soul. I come down and I see you. I see you. And sometimes until you're seen, you don't exist. You don't feel significance. You don't.
Yeah, we'll just shift everything around and work it.
Okay. Mhm. Okay. A little, somebody's not. And I think that was also in the movie Avatar. Do you remember that? I see you, I see you. It means I see the love and I see your feelings. I see your soul, and you mean everything to me. And it's kind of comes out of the Ubuntu tradition, which is sort of a complementary living that luminously embraces a community in healing radiance and actually allows people to really truly see each other. And there is another, in the Mayan tradition, there's a saying that our mothers hold us close and our fathers lift us up. And I'm gonna just wanted to tell a little story about my dad. Now, my dad was a salesman, and I didn't include him in when I went through all the grandfathers, and I should have said my father was born in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and went to work for the one company when he was 19 years old as an office boy, and 50 years later was a sales manager, vice president of the company. It's an unusual story for today, but he was so busy that I say some of my memories of my dad are him packing and unpacking a suitcase, packing and unpacking a suitcase. He traveled sometimes, he would be away for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. But I do have a memory when I was about 4 years old, we took a vacation and we went to this area called Summit Lake, Wisconsin. And it was just a little bitty town, and we rented a cabin, and we could walk from the cabin into town, and there was a bar and a grocery store, and I don't remember something else, but I remember you could go into the bar and you could step up to the counter at the bar, and you could order a double-decker ice cream cone. So it was an unusual place. And my mom loved the place. My mom had 7 children, 5 children in 7 years. She had her children very close together. But she loved the lake because it was very shallow, and she could, really watch us carefully. But I remember one day we were down and there was a pier, and we were just swimming there, and my dad was in his swimming suit. And my dad just picked me up in his arms. And there was a little beach that was like the next development over, and it had a big raft that was out, and it was out of our territory. We weren't allowed to go to the raft. But my dad picked me up and swam with me out to the raft. And then he put me up on top of the raft. And I remember that I was in my little swimming suit, and I had one of those plastic caps, you remember, that you wore when you were a kid, with a little what do you call, strap that held it on. And I remember looking out, and I looked over and I could see my mom and my brother, and I could wave to them. And I remember I felt like I was Esther Williams from an Esther Williams movie. And then my dad reached his arms out, and I jumped into his arms. And that was when I was 4 years old. But I remember it was a time that I just had my dad all to myself. I remember when I was in around 2nd grade, we were making Father's Day cards, and the teacher put the name Father up on the board because everybody didn't know spelling that well. And they said, well, what names do you call your dad? And somebody would put Daddy or Pop or Papa, or I don't remember some of the other names, but I raised my hand and I said, Daldy. Daldy, and everybody in the class broke out into laughter. And after that, I didn't call him Daldy. I don't know where I got it, but I always called him Daldy. I always called him Daldy. And in my family, it was easy to be a daughter to my dad because he didn't really expect that much. There were three boys and 2 girls, and I was the second oldest. But I remember he didn't think of me as, just being a good little girl, obeying my mom. And I was a very compliant little child. And I remember going to school and I had some struggles. So my dad told me that I was a C student. He said, well, my older brother, he was always good in school and was an athlete and everything. And he said, well, and Ann is a C student. So that's what I did. I got C's until I went away to college when I was about 29 years. I went away to the LPN program when I was about 29 years old. And I remember taking the first test and handing it back. And there I got a great big A, 100%. So I changed my outlook about who I was. But my brothers, much more was expected of them. They were expected to get good grades and to work hard and to have paper routes and go to work young and always be perfect and never be sissies. So I think our culture today still supports that vision for men. So it's difficult to be a man in our world today. It's difficult. Now, as I said, I offered to the community to tell stories about their dads. Then I did get Sharon Sinclair is going to tell us a little later a story about her grandfather. But I wanted to tell some other stories. And I remember a story, and this is about Les Brown. Do you remember Les Brown? He was a motivational speaker. He did series for PBS. He wrote several books. And the story is that Les Brown and his brother Wes, they were twins, were born to a single mother in a tenement in Miami, Florida. And she released them to be adopted when they were infants. And they were adopted by a single mother named Mamie Brown. And she raised them, working as a waitress, I believe, in a coffee shop. And when Les Brown went to school, he had a lot of struggles learning. And in the 5th grade, they demoted him a grade and labeled him educably mentally handicapped. And he went on to high school. His brother was very good in school, was talented, and was easy for him, but Les had a lot of challenges. And one day he was waiting outside of a classroom for one of his friends when he was in about a junior in high school. And the teacher for the classroom, whose name was Mr. Washington, just gestured for Les to come into the room. So he came into the room and he sat in the back, and Mr. Washington invited him to come up to the front of the room and write something on the board. And Les said, I can't do that. You know that I'm mentally handicapped. I'm a special ed kid. I'm a special ed kid. And Mr. Washington said, someone's opinion of you does not have to become your reality. Someone's opinion of you does not have to become your reality. Later that year, Les sort of became friends with Mr. Washington, and he went into the auditorium when Mr. Washington was addressing the senior class. And he told the senior class, and Les heard it for himself. He said, you have greatness within you. You have something special. If just one of you can get a glimpse of a larger vision of yourself, of who you really are, of what it is you bring to the planet, of your specialness, then in a historical context, the world will never be the same again. You can make your parents proud. You can make your school proud. You can make your community proud. You can touch millions of people and lives. He was talking to the seniors, but it seemed like he was talking to me, Les said. And so it was Mr. Washington, who wasn't his father, who was his teacher, who came down where he was, but lifted him up to a bigger vision of who and what he could be. I just love that story. And I think that Sharon is going to tell us a story about her grandfather.
Thank you, Anne. Those are wonderful stories and great memories, and so important our image of ourselves and where that comes from. So I just want to start my story today by telling you about a little divine expression of fatherly love today. Because normally on Sundays, since I've started coming to you with Zoom technology, I do most of my responsibilities at this cat sanctuary in the afternoon. So I shift my jobs around so that I'm not quite so rushed in the morning, but we have plans this afternoon. So I decided I would just squeeze everything in this morning. And in the process of doing so, one of our 14 cats escaped from the luxury cat condo and outdoor run that we have for their safety and made its way into the woods. And so I was very concerned about that because we have coyotes and a lot of other dangers out there. So I'm going through the woods trying to find this cat. And I kind of looked up at the sky and I said, okay, Dad, now here's the deal. I'm going to need some help here because I have to get myself to Fairhope. And I came back around to the outside of the garage, and there the cat had come back and gone into the garage, and my sister-in-law was able to close the door. So all is safe now. But it almost felt like a little bit of forgiveness to me from my dad, because ever since I was a child, I've been rescuing cats. And it used to give him a lot of concern because my dad was a mink farmer, and any diseases that cats carry could also be transmitted to the mink. So I just felt myself, that was a little connection with my dad this morning. But I'm going to tell you a little story about his father, who was my grandfather Sinclair. His name was Erastus Archibald, and he was of Scottish ancestry. Before that, I thought I'd just read this little poem. I didn't write it, but I found it about grandfathers. Grandfathers are fathers who are grand, restoring the sense that our most precious things are those that do not change much over time. No love of childhood is more sublime, demanding little, giving on demand, far more inclined than most to grant the wings, allowing us to reach enchanted lands. Though grandfathers must serve as second fathers, helping out with young and restless hearts, each has all the patience wisdom brings, remembering our passions more than others, soothing us with old and well-honed arts. And I lost my grandparents, all of them, when I was still a young girl. But when I was about 9, I think I was around 9 when my grandpa Sinclair came to live with us. He had been a Canadian Pacific Railway station agent. And I can have lots of memories of traveling by those steam engine trains in between little communities where we lived. I lived in a community that was just 85 people. It was like 2 hills, and in the valley, there were the railway tracks and the station where my grandparents would have worked. But they were retired by the time I came along. And my grandfather and grandmother lived in a more northern community with their daughter, Margaret, after they retired. And sadly, around 1955, my grandma died suddenly of a heart attack. And shortly thereafter, my grandfather and his daughter, Margaret, and husband were involved in a very serious car accident, which contributed to the arthritis that plagued him for the rest of his life. And in the final stages of his life, he came to live with my mother and father and our family. And so I have precious memories of things like going for ice cream and with my grandfather, but I don't have memories of him talking about his spiritual beliefs. So it was really special for me when I was clearing out my aunt's house that I came across a letter, a card for her birthday in 1959 that my grandfather had sent to her. And I had no idea that my grandfather had these types of thoughts or this fluency of poetic expression. So I just would like to share that with you. Dear daughter Margaret, Dad would just like to wish you a very happy birthday and many returns of the same. I know if I could lift the veil to the great beyond, little Mummy with that lovely smile of hers would join me in sincere wishes to our daughter. The cloud of misfortune, which has been hovering over us since October 3rd, 1955, seems to be lifting, and I think I can see a glimpse of that silver lining. If we are to clasp hands again with dear little Mum, we must believe there is a great beyond and God who rules all our lives. Sincere love to you, daughter, Dad. So when I found that, I felt a bit sorry that I had not taken advantage of opportunities to discuss spiritual beliefs with my grandfather. And so I urge you, if you are a grandfather or a grandmother and you have an opportunity to speak with the little ones about your beliefs, it's very important, because having worked with a lot of young children, I know that they are very reverent and they have a very spiritual nature that needs to be nurtured and encouraged. I remember when I was teaching grade 1, I used to do a non-denominational grace before lunch. It was presented to me when I was practice teaching at what was called the Waldorf School. And it just went, earth that gave to us this food, sun that made it ripe and good. Dearest earth, dearest sun, we will not forget what you have done. A blessing on the meal. And if I ever forgot to do the grace, they very quickly reminded me, Miss Sinclair, we haven't done the grace. So it's really important to experience that with children. And I think just to lift them up to a greater perspective and a greater sense of security than even we can provide for them on earth. And I just want to leave you with that message, and a very happy Father's Day to all you dads out there and grandpas.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you much. Since my daughter Colleen is here today, I wasn't really originally going to say this, but this is her first year without her dad. She lost her dad in February of 2020. And although we did not have an especially wonderful marriage, he became a wonderful grandfather and helper to Colleen. He helped her a lot. Colleen's husband travels a lot. And she had, 3 children close in age, set of twins when her son was 2 years old. And my former husband, Tim Murphy, was a wonderful help to her, went to their soccer games. And then I went home for his funeral and memorial service. And he also, he wasn't professionally a coach, but he was a coach for Little League and a coach for grade school football. For many years, and my 2 sons were very active in sports. And at the wake and funeral, I had so many of these young boys who had, now they're in their 30s, 40s, 50s, come up to me and say what a wonderful coach and what a wonderful role model he was. And he nurtured and supported many single boys who were being raised in single homes, African-American boys, 2 friends of my son, Danny. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that we do, perhaps he wasn't the best of a dad or the best of a husband, but he did grow and evolve and was a nurturing and supportive father and grandfather to Cece and all of the grandkids. And I wanted to tell a story also from a friend of mine. Her name is Barb Bryan, and Barb Bryan was a single mother. And she had her first children were a set of twin boys. And when they were 15 months old, she had her 3rd son. So she had three, and they both had all 3 boys have bright red hair. And she was a single mother working as a teacher. And the boys came home and started telling her about, they were playing basketball at this church parking lot down the street from where they lived. And that these 2 pastors would come out and play basketball with them. And they were the Church of the Nazarene, actually was the name of the denomination. And it was a father and son who were both pastors. And Barb thought, well, that's okay. And then she said, the pastor wants to come over and meet you, Mom. And the mom says, oh, she's thinking, oh, he wants to convert us. He wants us, to go to their church. He wants you guys to go to his church. So one day she said she was outside, and this man comes by, he says, can I talk to you, Mrs. Ryan? And she invites him in. She's worried about what if the house is a mess, straighten things up and offers them a cup of tea, and he sits down and she's thinking, oh, here it comes, the conversion talk. And he says, Mrs. Ryan, I know that those 3 boys are a real handful for you. She said, he said, how can we help you? How can we help you? He went down to the boys level, playing basketball with them, and was able to raise them up. And she said that those 2 men were a terrific help to her raising her boys. She said she probably could not have done it without them. They drove them places, they went to their sports events, helped them with school, never tried to convert them in any way. We're just, as we say in Unity, they were being the Christ in our world. They were being that divine masculine that those boys needed, a role model that showed, nurturance and support. And so that's why I honor the men here, the men who are up there on the screen, for being that divine masculine in our world today. So let's just take a deep breath and go into meditation. And if you haven't done so already, I invite you to just gently close your outer eyes and open your inner eyes. And just take a deep cleansing breath. Let's just move into our heart space located at the center of our chest. And let's just breathe into that space. And let's just allow our chair to support us. And just continue to breathe. And as we're breathing into our heart space, perhaps we feel a sense of expansion. A sense of calm, of peace. Begin to have a sense that we're not supported by our chairs, but supported in an embrace by our Abba God. Abum Shabashmawa, our Father who art in heaven. That divine energy that encompasses the divine masculine and the divine feminine, the wisdom and the love, in wholeness and oneness. And feeling that divine love, let's remember all of our fathers and grandfathers and father figures who've nurtured and supported us. And let us just rest in the silence for just a few minutes. And culturally, for many years, Men have not been valued by showing their emotions, but we affirm today that real men cry, real men hurt, and we need those real men in our world today. We will be brought out of meditation by a song that affirms that.
I know that you've heard all your life. Emotions make men weak. You must be brave, you must be bold, and tears are for the meek. And so you've held it all inside, like you were taught to do. But your soul feels like it's dying. It's time to tell the truth. Real men cry, real men feel, real men are not made of steel. Real men hurt in spite of what you've learned. Believe me, it's no lie. Real men Forget what you were told to be. Just be the things you are. A man of passion, fire and dreams, who listens to his heart. A man who doesn't hide himself behind a wall of stone, and shows the world he's human, made of tears and flesh and bone. Real men cry, real men feel, real men are not made of steel. Real men hurt in spite of what you've learned. Believe me, it's no lie. Real men cry. After a lifetime of pretending, what you knew was never true, you can write a brand new story. It's time to be the real you. Real men cry, real men feel, real men are not made of steel. And real men hurt in spite of what you've learned. Believe me, it's no lie. Real men cry.
Thank you, Anne. That's nice. This is the time we give our love offerings. You might hold your gift in your hand and we'll give thanks for the blessings and lovingly return a portion of God's generosity to our lives and service. If you would like to share with Unity on the Eastern Shore, there's our address there. If you're here in the sanctuary, there is a basket in the foyer on your way out. And we appreciate your gifts. Beautiful men, beautiful boy.
I see your struggle, I understand. it can't be easy being a man. The whole world is changing, but one thing stays true. There's always been so much expected of you. Breadwinner, mouse slayer, couch mover, love maker. You can't hide your trouble, you can't hide your joy. Beautiful man, beautiful boy. You've got to be tougher to take on this world. Got to be tender to take on this girl. It's all there inside you, but somehow you know when to hold tighter and when to let go. Rule breaker, chance taker, tear catcher, love maker. You are my trouble, you are my joy. Beautiful man, beautiful boy. Storm braver, lifesaver, hand holder, love maker. Exquisite trouble, ridiculous joy. Beautiful man, beautiful boy.
Our prayer for protection is on the screen and also on the wall here. Together, the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, for we are one. And we'll have the peace song. Shall we join hands?
Yeah.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be. With God as our Father, brothers all are we. Let me walk with my brother in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my solemn vow. To take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally.
much for being the man of God. that you are. We honor you. We honor you.